The Angry Chicken is a production of Amove TV. Bookmark amove.tv for more gaming and esports shows. The Angry Chicken is directly supported by listeners like you via patreon.com/TAC. And if you would like to see a live recording of The Angry Chicken, come on out to CreateCon in Orlando this July. Tickets and info over at createconvention.net.
Hey everyone! Get in here!
Ready for action! I've got the beast in my sight. A podcast about Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft. This is The Angry Chicken.
Greetings and welcome back, everyone, to The Angry Chicken. I'm Garrett Weinzerl, and I'm sitting here as always with Willie Dills Gregory and Miss Jocelyn Moffat. Welcome back, guys.
Yo, good to be back.
Very excited. Had a really busy weekend, so it's good to kind of like sit and chill and talk to my friends about Hearthstone, but bonus person.
Yes, indeed. We're joined today by a Hearthstone designer and friend of the show, Dean, a.k.a. Iksar.
Hi,
Dude.
guys. I'm excited to be here and talk to you guys also about Hearthstone. I also had a busy weekend, so talking with friends about Hearthstone sounds great.
It sounds like a good time. We're so glad you could join us today. You were actually supposed to be here last week, but you got sick.
I was very sick. I was sick Monday and Tuesday last week, so I had to cancel. I was sad. I messaged you. I was sad, but it's okay. It got rescheduled, so it's good.
Your message literally just said, "I am sad," and I was like, "I don't get this. What is the point?"
I'm sad.
And then we were sitting there wondering where Dean was, and I'm like, "I don't know, guys. He just sent me a message that just said I am sad, but there was no information." Yeah, man, we're glad you can make it. We had a chance to sit down with you back at BlizzCon and talk a little bit about League of Explorers, but now you're on like a proper podcast. We've got you sitting in what I've been referring to as the Blizzard Florida office. Folks can't really see, but you're
really nice.
Yeah, folks can't really see from the angle, but you're sitting on like a palm tree couch, which is
a floral printed like rattan couch.
Yeah,
The
really nice.
official Blizzard podcasting couch, I'm guessing, right?
I think it's new, but we're trying it out.
wonderful.
Well,
Great.
the meta's totally shaken out now in the last week, and now, it's good that we have you here because it's the new patch or the new content has been completely solved, and there's no new decks ever evolving anymore. So now we can really kind of get into the meat of all this new content.
I think we have a ways to go before that happens, but
I think we have a long
figure
ways
it
to
out.
go.
Maybe you figure it out. I heard you got Legends, so maybe.
I did.
You had it.
Yeah, and you actually sent me a tweet saying that you watched my video about that, which was very nice to hear.
That was getting feedback on the ladder system and that sort of thing is really useful for me. And I don't know. I watched your video. I was excited that you got Legends. So yeah,
it was exciting. I mentioned this on the instance yesterday. When was I on the instance? Anyway, Sunday. Thank you, Jocelyn. Yeah, so we have a new recording time, but we were talking about the grindiness of World of Warcraft before, a long time ago, vanilla World of Warcraft, and the sense of accomplishment you got from grinding things out. And I definitely got that sense of accomplishment. So it flipped my opinion just a little bit, but I still had some criticism. So anybody who hasn't watched the video, definitely go check it out. But yeah, it was cool that I heard from you guys that you guys are paying attention. That was awesome. It made me feel real good. So thanks for that.
So how many times in the video did you actually say, "So as a Legend player"?
No, 0 times. I said it a lot afterwards. The very next show.
Now you can
Garrett
say
was hanging out at DreamHack.
from this point. Yeah.
Yeah, he only makes us suffer through that, Jocelyn.
Oh,
he doesn't
okay.
make himself suffer through that. But so anyway, Dean, so we have you here. What is your official title? Because since I first ever spoke to you, which was forever ago, when you were listening to old podcasts of mine, you probably shouldn't have because they were terrible. You've changed positions many times. So what's your official title now?
I am an associate game designer on Hearthstone, primarily working on final design, which most people would probably consider as balance. There's a little bit more to it, but I work in final design on Hearthstone. Gotcha.
So what does that necessarily entail?
I think the primary focus of the job would be looking at a lot of the cards the initial design passes over, where initial design looks at a lot of the flavor and the sort of thematic direction of a set, and then we sort of get the cards and we say, okay, where do these work mechanically? What kind of costs and health and attack and stuff can we put things at so people are playing a variety of awesome new decks. Of course, there's a lot of implementation. We help a lot with also the thematics as well. But I would say the primary function is making sure Hearthstone is still like a really varied and wide experience for the people playing the game on the ladder.
Okay. What would you say was the thematic thing you were working within for Old Gods?
Old Gods I think it was a tiny bit of a struggle because Hearthstone's very light and charming, and Old Gods, I think the theme there is really dark and mysterious and like spine-tingling sort of vibe you have going on. So being able to do that in a Hearthstone sort of charm way, I think is really the theme that we were going for there. You can see that on cards like Shifter's Heiress and stuff, where you have the art for those cards where it's like, oh, it's Old Gods and it's spooky and, there's some tentacles there, but it still gets across a lot of the Hearthstone vibe.
They're totally adorable tentacles, so it's okay.
Exactly.
It passes.
Adorable tentacles. I don't really know what... we send art descriptions out saying, some amount of things. I'm not really involved as much in that process, but I'm sure cute tentacles might have been on there.
For the darkest content that you guys have put out, it actually has infused probably the most fun cards in the history of Hearthstone. I mean,
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, Yogg-Saron going off is hilarity every single time, and whether or not the card is good, I just want to play it. Like I've had arguments with my chat over whether the card is actually good or not, and I'd love to talk to you sometime about that. But whether or not it's good, it's one of those cards that just incentivizes people to play it, and even when it gets played against you, you just sit back and go, oh my god, okay, well, let's see what happens this time. And it's
there's actually sort of a funny moment in playtesting like a long time ago when we sort of got to the design that Yogg-Saron is now, whereas we were doing some playtesting and I was playing some games against someone named Ryan on our team, and I had basically lethal on board, and I'm a very, very, very competitive person. Like everyone sort of knows me for being very competitive. And I had lethal on board, but I passed the turn so I could play Yogg-Saron the next turn. And everyone's like, whoa. Like, Yogg-Saron makes you just pass the turn so you can play him because he's that fun. And I was like, yeah, well, I guess that's the first card that's ever made me do that because, I don't know. So Yogg-Saron is really, really cool. I really, really love where he ended up. I think the power level is about right for him. He's just one of the more exciting cards we've ever made.
I would definitely agree. Well, actually, now that you talk about your competitive nature, let's talk about how you got into card games and gaming in general. Because, I think when I first heard of you, it was when you first started working for Blizzard, but also that you were getting like high-ranking legend finishes on the ladder. And so what's your history with like card games and gaming in general and how you kind of got into this whole thing?
It's sort of a funny story, actually. I'll try to tell the shortest version I can. But as far as my history with card games, it's essentially none.
Wow.
I had friends that played Magic, back in high school and middle school, but I never actually got into it. And I collected Pokemon cards when I was a kid, but I never actually played the game. So Hearthstone was actually the first really collectible card game I had ever, put a lot of time into. I was actually a little bit disappointed because even internally, not everyone knows about all the games being made at any given time within the company. So for the longest time, there's a code name for Hearthstone, and it was Pegasus. And when I ended up finding out what it was, eventually, I was like, oh, it's a card game. I was actually a little bit disappointed. I was like, oh man, a card game. I don't really play card games. And then I took it home and started playing it little by little. And before you know it, I was playing like 5 or 6 hours a night. So I'm like, oh my, this game is really fun. And then I was just playing a ton. And by the time the first actual season came out, I didn't really know what the ladder system really entailed. I knew it went 25-1, and then what happens after that, I don't know. So then I played a bunch. I ended up getting the legend, and then the little number popped up, and it's like, oh hey, 1. I'm like, what does that mean? It's like, oh, you're like number 1 in North America. I was like, sweet. So I emailed like sort of the deck list that I was using to an internal mailing list we have for Hearthstone fans, just a mailing list for a bunch of people that work at Blizzard that like Hearthstone. And someone that ended up emailing me back was a guy named Mike Dene, who was basically the lead, balance designer here on the Hearthstone team at the time. And he was kind of the only guy doing it at the time. Like now we have 4 of us. But back then it's sort of hard to do final design, as it turns out, with one person, because it's hard to play games of Hearthstone with one person. So
sure.
I ended up coming over and playtesting with him a bunch, and then after a couple of interviews, like over the next 4 or 5 months or so, I ended up getting a job on the team.
Wow. Do you remember what deck you were playing when you were in number one?
I think I was playing Aggro Warlock, like the first ever. Some version of Druid and like Power Overwhelming and Arcane Golems and some unhealthy stuff like that.
Some completely imbalanced stuff, sure.
Yeah.
So were you to blame for the Arcane Golem's recent change then?
The four of us are to blame for sure.
It's fine though, because now when you play the that mage 6-drop, you get a 4/4 sometimes. It's pretty sweet, man.
Sometimes, yeah. Arcane Golem is one of those cards where when we're doing playtesting, normally like when we're trying to build a deck that like one-shots people, and it's like, we don't want this deck to be successful. A lot of times we're just putting like 2 Arcane Golems in those decks. So the time when every single deck that you build in playtesting that's, this is really unhealthy and we don't want this to be powerful, and Arcane Golem goes in all of those decks, at that point you kind of sit back and think to yourself, like, what is Arcane Golem really doing for Hearthstone? Yeah. So I think that's sort of where the nerf comes from.
As far
there's a lot of OTK decks running around right now, but a lot of them center around a legendary card, which I think is okay. But when Arcane Golem is a 2 of, and you can definitely get there, things get a little squirrely.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of designing cards, take us through I don't know, a normal day at your job. What is the process like when you go to design and test a new card?
It sort of depends on where we are in the milestone. I think like for, say a month before Old Gods was coming out, a lot of stuff is set in place, and it takes a really long time to play test and play a bunch of games and really talk about with everybody like what this means and what this card means for the metagame. And if we rate this card a 9 out of a 10, because we do sort of like a 1 to 10 scale when we're talking about like, hey, what power level is this card? Is this a 10? Is this a 9? And then when we look at a card and we're like, hey, this is a 10. So does it have the qualities that we want for a card to be a 10? Like, is it fun to play? Is it not horrifying experience to lose against? Do you have to build a new deck in order to play this card? And if it hits like a lot of those qualities, then we're like, hey, you know what? Like maybe we're okay that this card is a 10. If it's a card like Arcane Golem that says, hey, this card's a power level 10, and you use it in OTK decks, then that's not really something that we're really excited about. Mm-hmm. So changing stuff that late in the process is usually not something we're looking to do. Like maybe change like one number here or there. And if it's really, really early in the process, say like right after we finish doing League of Explorers and we're just talking about doing Old God stuff, at that point, then basically everything is on the table. I mean, we've play tested like the craziest stuff. I think I remember the first design for Yasharaj was like if this card's in your deck, you turn into Yasharaj, and Yasharaj has like 15 health, and he had some like crazy new hero power and like transform. I don't know. It was like totally crazy, like stuff that we would never actually do, but we placed this a bunch of games with it to see, what's fun and what's not. And I think we learned a lot from, and we do learn a lot from doing that process. So in terms of like day to day, there's a lot of implementation, a lot of bug fixing, a lot of meetings talking about, what's the next set or what was good about this last set, and a lot of reading feedback from the community. But in terms of designing cards, it's definitely where we are in the milestone that kind of dictates that.
Sure. Are you kind of presented with like a huge batch of cards, or do you kind of slowly build your way towards a full set?
We have an Excel sheet that's a shared Excel sheet that everyone looks at.
Okay.
And whatever in the sheet is kind of what we're looking at. And if any of us have, really cool designs, we can just pop them in the sheet or email them out and be like, hey, we think this is cool. One of us can implement it, and then we just start playtesting it. So we're looking
at doing our podcast then.
We're looking at like all kinds of cards all the time. So of course, you should probably focus on 1 or 2 at a time. You can't.
Sure.
It's not as useful to just throw 30 new cards in a deck and see what happens. But sometimes that is useful.
So it sounds like you get to kind of rapidly prototype these things. I'm assuming you have a internal build where you can very quickly and easily add a new card and just start playing around with it.
Yes. I mean, depending on what you want the card to do, then it's pretty easy. If I want to make a 4/5 vanilla Yeti, I can do that in about 10 seconds. If I want to do something crazier that's not supported by the tool, Usually there's some, crazy way to do it that doesn't work exactly how you want it to, but you can get the point across. But we can talk to engineering, and engineering's really, really good about turning stuff around for us. Our guys are super amazing, guys and girls, I should say. Like, we have a lot of really talented engineers.
Now I want to find out who we need to talk to so that the next time we're out there for BlizzCon, we can come in and design just the dumbest cards ever and play a game with them.
I think Lindsay would probably be the person to talk to.
Okay.
It's pretty easy. Yeah,
always
it's super
Lindsay.
fun. It's super fun.
That would be amazing to see that tool.
Oh, I'd love to play around with that. Joss, you want to take the next question?
Sure. You mentioned some of the design steps that you went through, starting with Yasharaj and how, did super crazy things. Each of the old gods are actually really different. So can you just talk to us a little bit about how you went about designing those and, how much Warcraft and some of those raid encounters actually played into that design process? Because I know like N'Zoth is a god that we've never actually even seen in Warcraft. So like where do you start and how do you actually go about designing those old god legendary cards?
I think it's about half and half for the old gods, because like Yogg-Saron is crazy, and he does stuff with your mind, and like what is that really fantasy of what Yogg-Saron does? He's like the wild and crazy old god, I guess you would say, from a lore perspective.
The old god who likes to party. Yeah.
Yogg-Saron's a little crazy.
I want to see that SNL skit.
So we're really looking to do like a really wild and crazy design, and we went through a lot of different things to get to what he is now. But it came from a place of thinking about what Yogg-Saron would actually do. And Cthulhu was sort of the same way, which is like a big and powerful old god. Basically, we wanted something that was saying, I'm gaining influence from all the stuff in your deck or in your collection. And so like all the little cultist guys that give him buffs, we thought that was like a really cool idea. I think a lot of the terminology we were using from a very early stage was, wouldn't it be cool to build your own monster over the course of the game? And I think Cthulhu was sort of the right choice to do that. When we talk about cards like N'Zoth, N'Zoth I don't think came from a place of what does N'Zoth do, because we're not really sure. Like, kind of as you said, there's not really a lot of examples for like what N'Zoth is or does. So he came from a place of like, what are old gods? Old gods are big and they're huge and powerful, and we want them to be 10 mana because that it makes like thematic sense for us. Okay, so we don't have a lot of examples for what N'Zoth might do. So what do we want, from a card like that, from a gameplay perspective? Mm-hmm. And I think gameplay-wise, what you want usually, like best case scenario, is if you can make one card that inspires people to make a deck that doesn't already exist in the meta, so like just get more decks out there and more variety out there, like that's a huge win for us. So when you look at something like N'Zoth, that's really where we're coming from with that. It's like a lot of the Death Rattle stuff was going away in Standard, so how can you motivate people to build Death Rattle decks? And I think N'Zoth is so powerful that he really accomplishes that. So you're still seeing a lot of those decks that you totally just wouldn't see a bunch of decks that exist out there now if it wasn't for N'Zoth. Mm-hmm. And Yasharaj was just sort of like along the same lines. It wasn't necessarily from like a build around perspective, but like what does a big powerful old god do? And like pulling something from your deck and being like a big giant guy, we just thought was sort of a cool design. We've had that, I think, in our back pocket for a while. It's been on a number of different cards, but we just decided to do it now, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it either takes an OP 1 drop apparently to make Death Rattle decks a thing, or or an OP 10 drop. I prefer the OP 10 drop because you get some time before it.
Yeah, time to react
is
really important.
I really like the design of all of them, but would you agree with the community that maybe Yasharaj is maybe struggling to find its place a little bit? Did you guys have a plan for that card? Did you think, oh my god, this card could be insane? Were any of them like worrying to you?
Yasharaj, I think, is the only one that is. I mean, he's not necessarily proactive.
Yeah.
Cthulhu is pretty proactive. Sure. Yogg-Saron can be proactive one way or another. And N'Zoth, also can be. Like, you can get Tyrion and Chilmaw, and I would consider, playing taunt minions relatively proactive, especially when you're filling your board. So I think that the place where Yasharaj is, I would say, like viable for a metagame is when the metagame gets really, really slow.
Yeah.
And that might not happen. I mean, people are using now. I think it's really my same answer for like Archthief for FOM. The only metagame where he actually is going to see play is when the meta is very, 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 very slow. And he's very powerful in that circumstance because you get a ton of value from that particular card. And it's really the same for Yashiraj. And you don't really have to build your deck in some totally crazy way like you do with N'Zoth. You don't have to really include, a bunch of cards that you wouldn't otherwise. So in a metagame where the meta is really, really slow and you can just put in the big giant dudes that you want to, I think, that's the place for him. It's just not really, that's not happening right now, which I think is why the perception is he's not very strong.
So something more along the lines of like a tournament meta where we see games going on and on and on. There's lots of fatigue. There's lots of, well, even you mentioned Archthief. He's getting tournament play even in the EU prelims.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's okay. I mean, I think we were pretty aware that he was going to be weaker in like the environment that you're kind of seeing now.
Yeah.
But if that changes, I think you'll start to see him show up.
Well, the ladder's always going to have a bit of speed to it, just because people are trying to get there within a month period, right? So,
well, I don't know if it's necessarily tied to that, because I mean, like, games are pretty similar length. I mean, the difference between playing Face Hunter and Control Warrior is pretty big, but win rate is still always going to be by far the biggest factor in laddering, especially because of stuff like win streaks. So I mean, even if you have like a 5% difference in win rate, like, you should really be playing the deck that you're most comfortable with, regardless of how fast something is.
Yeah, that was a breakthrough that you told me one time when we were talking to you, and I was struggling going up the ladder. Where you were like, well, don't focus less on how fast you're playing your deck and focus more on which decks are getting you results.
Yeah, I mean, there's some math that you can put behind it on paper, but I mean, once you actually like put the math to paper, then it's pretty apparent that you should just be playing the decks that give you the highest win rate. Of course, if you have the same success with a very, very fast deck versus a very, very slow deck, then of course you're going to ladder a little bit faster with the faster deck, but that's not always the case for a lot of people.
I think though that may or may not be, well, that definitely is true, but I think the problem is perception, right? Yep. So even though that may be true, people are still going to perceive that if I play a faster deck, I'm going to get there quicker. And you see things like conceding the moment you fall behind on board and all this kind of craziness while people are trying to ladder up. So really, it affects people whether it's real or not. But like, I talked about in my video, the key for me last season was a 67% win rate, and it just made it go by really, really quickly. When you can win at that rate over the entire season, that's really what's going to do it for you. So you're absolutely correct. I hope people hear this, because we get this question all the time, like, how do I rank up? I'm stuck at this rank. I'm stuck at this rank. Should I go aggro? And it's like, well, no. Stay with the deck you're playing. Learn how to play it properly. And adjust some tech cards here and there for the meta. But
like, some of that I think is good. I mean, it's not really like a Jedi mind trick we're trying to play or anything, but I mean, I think the perception is definitely, if I could play enough games, I could get Legend.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that like a million times, and that's, it's not totally true. Like, it's not everybody out there that if they played enough games, they could get to Legend. Like, of course, I understand the way that win streaks work and the way that math works. Eventually, if you were to play an infinite amount of games, I'm sure you would get there. But realistically, you're just going to have a high win rate. Like, that's just, I mean, unless you're playing like actual 4,000 games, or unless you're actually a bot, you're just going to have to win a high percentage of games. And the fact that the perception is like, if I were to play enough, like, hey, I didn't have enough time this month. The fact that people seem to perceive that, they could get to a higher place is not all downside to me. But it's sort of tricky. Like, I understand that it's a little bit grindy. So it's certainly not a perfect system, but there are some upsides, I think.
So getting back to balancing some of the cards in Old Gods, were there any others that were particularly hard to achieve the balance you were looking for with, stuff like Yashiraj aside?
Well, certainly Yogg-Saron was difficult because he's worrisome. Yogg-Saron's a super fun card, but it's very, very high impact randomness. And randomness is great. Like, we love randomness in our game because it makes everything different and a lot more fun. But we also understand that it can be quite frustrating at times. And Yogg-Saron is one of the most random ones we've ever made, if not the most so. So if he was, say, a card like Sylvanas or Ragnaros that just goes in, if you're building a control deck, you're just say, oh, hey, I want Yogg-Saron in my deck because he's good. If he was that power level, I think that would be sort of a detriment to ladder, because you never want people to feel like, I'm going to get to turn 10 and then, someone's going to play Yogg-Saron, and then depending on how that goes, I'm going to win or lose, because it really cheapens sort of the entire experience. If you get to a point where Yogg-Saron is impacting your games, not that often, like every 25 games, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad and you get a laugh out of it, that's really the place that you want Yogg-Saron to be. And then on the flip side, if you lean too hard and we're scared of this high impact randomness and frustration, then you get him to a point where no one plays him at all. And no one really gets to have that, really fun experience. So cards like that are a struggle for sure. It's like you want people to play them, but you don't want them to reach the, Sylvanas type level, I guess, in terms of like putting him in that many decks. I'm really happy with where he ended up. I mean, it took a very large amount of playtesting and focus in order to get there. So it certainly wasn't zero cost, but I think it turned out really, really good. And the same with N'Zoth as well. N'Zoth we struggled with a lot. Because obviously, as you guys have seen, N'Zoth is very, 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 very powerful. And sort of like I said before, we went through like all of our criteria of, what makes, like, if a card is a power level of a 10, what kind of qualities does it need to have in order for us to be okay with that? And N'Zoth really came across with a lot of those qualities, like, build a deck that people have never seen. And also, he's N'Zoth. He's an old god. He's a big part of the set. We want, the old gods to be a big part of everything. So there's a lot of playtesting involved there, because just a little bit too powerful with N'Zoth, and then every deck becomes a N'Zoth deck. And then when you were looking for that variety, you really shot yourself on the foot when you're really just trying to create more variety. So yeah, those cards are tough, but I'm really happy with where they ended up.
It did seem at first like we were going to just go for months where it was who drew Cthulhu first, and then things shook out, and it's not that way anymore, which I'm really happy about.
I laughed a bit because, I mean, obviously we play tested Cthulhu a bit. He's I would say the most core piece of the set. So he probably had the most design iterations and playtesting as well. So when people were like, oh, everyone's going to lose the Cthulhu decks, I'm like, well, we played about 500 games of Cthulhu. I'm pretty sure it's not going to end up that way. Yeah. So wasn't too worried about that.
You keep referring to your your power ranking internally, like the 1 to 10. I'm not going to ask you for individual numbers and individual cards, but are there any cards that you guys perceived or rated high that you're surprised aren't seeing as much play?
That's a good question. I would say we're usually pretty on par with how things end up. Like, this is the 5th or 6th set, I think. Like, obviously with cards like I remember it was Mike and I a long time ago. Mike is my boss, and we were playtesting a lot of Undertaker, and I think that specifically I for sure undershot the power level on Undertaker quite a bit, and we sort of paid the price for that, I think. But since then we've released 5 or 6 sets now, so there's a lot of learning that goes into that. So I think that now we're sort of in a place where we're pretty close to what we think what the power level ends up shaking out to be. And when there's a card that isn't seeing a lot of play, there's almost always a reason for that. Like, hey, it's a card, it's a tool that you can use in either the right or wrong metagame, or you can use it if you want to have fun. Like, you can play Servant of Yogg-Saron, but that wasn't a card that we were like, oh, we definitely want to see this in the 8% of decks, and we undershot it. It's like we undershot it for a reason. Like, there's a reason why it's a 5 mana 5/4 and not something different.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Dills, you want to take the next question?
We moving on to Arena?
Yeah, why not? Go for it.
All right, let's move on to Arena. All right, so we haven't had any official word from you guys on whether or not there's a higher chance of drafting old god cards, although I can tell you from the way it feels like we're seeing a lot of them in drafts. So what is the similar case from before where the new cards have a higher percentage of being drafted? Is that the case again? And if that is true, are you guys going to start telling us that every single time, or are we going to have to figure it out through
I believe that there is a 50% increase. I'm not really exactly clear on how all the messaging goes out, but you're probably right. It's a good idea to communicate a lot of these things. I think that I know specifically like people have asked Broad on Twitter, and he's pretty good about responding. But I'm also recognize that's not not everyone is following Broad's Twitter and looking for all of these comments. So
yeah,
it might be a good idea to sort of publish that. But I will send that feedback to the guys when I get.
All right. Well, I follow up though real quick, and this isn't really on there. So if if this isn't something you can talk about, that's fine. But we talked briefly to you about Arena at BlizzCon, and you said there was a lot of people internally who play a lot of Arena. Yep. How much do you guys talk about Arena these days? I mean, I know like new cards and all that stuff is probably your main focus, but just kind of internally, is there a bunch of talk about Arena still? Or are we, because I think there's still a feeling for Arena players like, well, when are we going to get something new? Like, I'm just kind of curious how much you guys are still kind of playing a lot, and if you play a lot of Arena, how much that's really kind of thought about.
I play a bunch of Arena, and we're constantly talking about Arena. I mean, Arena is one of the buttons. It's like it's one of the buttons on the main screen.
Yeah, the main buttons.
It's not going away, and that mode's going to be there, basically forever, as far as I know. I mean, so it's really important to us. Like, it's important as the play button. So I don't have anything to announce, unfortunately, but I can tell you for sure that we have meetings and we're talking about like how can we improve Arena, like what's a cool feature for Arena, like new and crazy wild features, and also minor improvements, and how can we celebrate Arena players that are playing all the time right now? Like, how can we get more players to play Arena? Like, is like the Arena a good experience for newer players, and if it's not, how can we improve that? Because Arena can get, I think it's harder to have synergies in your deck over time, because especially if Arena is technically wild.
It's a huge card pool now, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, 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 really big. And I think like it's really, really fun to build synergistic decks. So how can we sort of hit those goals? Like, how can we make the deck building experience a little bit more enticing for people too? So I mean, it's certainly something that we talk about a lot. And of course, there's always the rarity conversation of, what rarity should this card be for Arena? It's unlikely that you'll see a bunch of common, very powerful AoE spells that enter Arena in Mage or Paladin or something like that. Yeah, so I mean, we're aware of the Arena power levels, so we sort of adjust for that. A lot of rarity comes into when we talk about complexity as well. If a card is very complex, we're more likely to make that, a rare or an epic card, so people aren't opening it in packs quite as often. So you're not like, when you open a pack and you see 4 common cards, they're all not like, do this crazy thing and give you poisons and dream cards and stuff. And you're like, what is that? Like, I don't understand what's going on. So the complexity factor is a big one, but we also think about Arena as well.
Cool. Well, I have a lot of ideas, so if you want to talk after some other time, I would love to.
Anytime. You guys know my contacts, so you're welcome to send me anything.
Awesome.
Dill's the champion of Arena.
I'm fairly certain Dill.
I'm glad someone is the champion of Arena. It makes me happy to talk about Arena.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Dills could keep going until he was out of breath.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll spare you. But
Joss, you want to take one of the first community questions?
Sure, yeah. We actually had a question come in from the post over on Hearthhead, and I don't actually have a name here, but they wanted to know if there's any way that Blizzard is actually researching or developing any features that might help to promote a bigger community within Hearthstone. So anything like what we've got in some of other Blizzard titles, so things like chat channels and heroes, clans, guilds, anything that might make it a little bit easier to kind of have your community within the actual game client of Hearthstone.
Yeah, that's a really tricky question, because it's really about finding what is the best way for Hearthstone to do that. Because I mean, obviously WoW has guilds, and maybe guilds are really cool in Hearthstone, and maybe they're a little bit more bloat in the UI than we want. Like StarCraft also has chat channels and places to interact with people, and maybe that's the right thing for Hearthstone. Or maybe that's too much for our chat system to really handle from a UI perspective. But obviously, having more friends in a better community is important to us, because I mean, like, we want you to be able to play with your friends, and you're more likely to go back and play a game and have fun with it if you have a bunch of friends in a community and interact with. So that stuff is really important. Like having like the small stuff like spectate a friend quests, like I think pushes you a little bit to say like, oh hey, like maybe I'll have some interaction here, and stuff like we have with the co-op brawls. is another sort of push in that direction. It's like, oh, how can I interact with somebody else? And maybe, you guys become friends afterwards. So right now, I think that we're doing smaller pushes like that while we sort of figure out what is the big overarching, plan for making the Hearthstone community better. I think we certainly talked about stuff like clans and chat channels. That's certainly not lost on us. But I think finding the right thing for Hearthstone is really the struggle there. But we'll continue to make like these smaller foot pushes, like quests that motivate you to play with people and co-op brawl and that kind of thing. And then there's always Fireside Gathering, which we're super like developing and talking about and really excited about. I know one of my favorite people, Pat Nagel, is sort of in charge of designing a lot of the Fireside Gathering stuff and making that a better experience for people. So I'm really excited about the future of Fireside Gathering as well.
God, I always forget that Pat Nagel is a real person.
Yeah,
and not just the wrong way to say Nat Pagel.
Exactly.
That's great. I love Pat. He's a great dude.
Yeah, we it's funny how the social features come up on the show pretty often, actually, and I always bring up the same point, which is, well, I really want it, but I'm not sure how it works from a UI perspective. Yeah. But I don't care because I really want it.
It's not the community's job to come up with the best way to implement it in game, but to want better ways to interact with your friends is certainly a reasonable request. But like I said, it's just about finding what the best way is to do that for our game.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, we had another question come to us from our TAC podcast subreddit, which wanted to know your take on cards that never really saw competitive play, especially kind of looking at it now with some things moving in the wild and whatnot. So cards, they give the example of Feign Death, Bouncing Blade, Trogzor, and Gallywix. Like how it gets to that point. Were some of these cards that you thought would see play and just kind of didn't end up making it into competitive decks?
I mean, that's great to us because obviously there's gonna be a bunch of cards that they see a bunch of play and we target them. We're like, hey, this card's really fun. Like we thought Piloted Shredder was a really fun card and it really communicated what Goblins versus Gnomes was, and it was a 10 on the power level scale, and we kind of looked at that and it's like, yeah, we're okay with that. Really communicates the kind of thing that we want for this set. And then other cards like Bouncing Blade, where it's like, oh, Bouncing Blade is, essentially a single target removal spell. So, let's not make it too crazy. But if you want to put it in your deck with Garabashi Berserker and then try to get some crazy wombo combo thing off, then that's great. And then I know for a fact, like people like Zalay had, when they're making Fatigue Warrior, they tried it out, they put it in the deck. So having a card like that that's played in 1% of decks is great because you need cards like that. You need cards that surprise people when they get played. You need cards that if you're a deck builder, you're like, I'm going to try this new thing that no one's expecting. So because if every card is sort of evenly played, I think that makes it a lot less exciting for cards like Bouncing Blade and when you're building a deck to spice your deck up a bit by doing some crazy special thing. So when we're making cards, we're certainly not saying, okay, here's 100 cards, let's make sure they're all played evenly because that is balance. That is not, how we think of balance at all. I think one of the only super important things about balance is that, people are playing a wide variety of different things. So as long as that's happening, then I'm pretty happy. But in terms of Trogzor didn't get played very much. That's okay. But he did get played by some people, and when you saw him, you're surprised, and he was sort of like a novel thing that popped up, and you're sort of surprised by it. So that's really important to us.
Any cards from this set that you've been surprised haven't seen a big splash yet?
I guess Zaral's coming around. I was actually really surprised by the feedback on Zaral, where like, oh, it's too slow, can't play him. I was like, okay. So
you went right into my rogue deck.
Oh yeah, I think more and more people are playing him now, and the same thing with Huckster. I think it was really fast. Like people realized that card is really good. A few days in, but the feedback initially was, oh, it's not really that great. And the 4/3 priest card that also, I think it's like
Shifting
a half
Shade.
seal. Yeah, that card is very strong to me. It's super fun to play as well. Gives you a lot of different options, especially if you're facing other late game decks. You can get a lot of their late game cards. So
well, it allows you to play N'Zoth Priest without overloading your deck with all these death rattle cards because you just end up creating them. You put in Museum Curator and then you put in that, and then you create cards, and then you can fill your deck with all the removal you need. And then you've also got this late game option. It's actually really, really good.
Yeah,
I'm surprised about Cho'Gall. What happened to Cho'Gall? I
You
saw
guys
that
were
card
so
and I was
excited.
like,
I was too.
this is broken.
Cho'Gall initially was not this turn only, so it was just forever.
Oh.
And we were playing some decks where you would just play Cho'Gall, and then at some point during the game, you would just Doom and then Reno, like on the same turn. You just fill your entire hand and heal to full. It's like, well, we should probably make it this turn.
All right.
So that changed the power level quite a bit. I think the ways to play Warlock right now, they usually float a lot of mana anyway. Like you're just life tapping and playing one card at a time and playing actually very, very reactive. So the turns Warlock needs to have some giant tempo swing, like say like a Rogue. I mean, you have like stuff like Prep and Sap, and you really, really need that because there's not a lot of healing and you can't just wait around forever. Warlocks just tend to wait around forever, so I don't think they need like the huge tempo swing card, kind of like Cho'Gall Siphon, something like that. Their decks just don't really need it.
I have a feeling that at some point Cho'Gall might enter.
Oh yeah, I definitely think so. Because I mean, 7/7/7 with that effect, I mean, it sounds very, very strong. I'm sure he's only one, very good Warlock spell away from being extremely powerful. And Siphon, I think, is almost already there.
Yeah.
We took a lot of the healing out of the game, so it makes it hard for Warlock to decide.
I was just gonna say, without exactly having Reno in your hand, it can be a little scary to
super
dump
scary.
6 or 7 of your health or something to do something crazy. Especially with all the burst that's going on right now. So
yeah, that's why I'm happy to see Reno Lock still seeing play in tournaments. I'm like, all right, there's hope. There's hope for our friend Cho'Gall.
Yeah, definitely.
So, well, one of the final questions we wanted to bring up, we got asked actually in a couple different places, which was again kind of going into this realm of cards that don't see play and whether that's intentional or not intentional. When is a mechanic or a card considered unsuccessful versus being intentionally underpowered? There's been a lot of chat in our subreddit and in our email about Joust as a big example of this, because it was a mechanic that had a really bright spotlight kind of shown on it when we were going into the grand tournament. And once we actually received the expansion, there were very few Joust cards that saw any play.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times that's just maybe they were placed like slightly incorrectly in terms of power level. But Joust wasn't. I would say the bigger one to talk about would be Inspire, certainly, because Joust was we didn't keyword Joust, and it was just put on a few cards, and it was really like more of a flavor thing than anything else. It's like two cards jousting into each other and crashing. It like really says the grand tournament to me. So having cards like that is really cool. I think like Healing Wave will see more play over time, so I think we'll still see that card. A lot of times the upside was so big because we want the Joust to be really exciting, right? Like we want it to be, if you win the Joust, you're super, super duper duper happy. And if you lose the Joust, then it's like, oh man, like, maybe next time I'll win. But there has to be some drama there, or else the effect's really not that exciting. So it ends up being sort of the case when you're balancing these cards that the upside and downside, they're so much different that if you play the card and you don't win, it's real bad for you. So basically, like it's just not consistent enough to put in people's decks. So I think, maybe that could have gone a little bit better. I think maybe having ties go to the winner, like, may have been a reasonable solution, but I'm not super unhappy with it. Like it didn't affect a ton of cards. Like it still like had its flavor hit for us. I think for Inspire, we ended up learning fairly late that Inspire it was pretty snowbally, right? Like the Stampeding Kodo guy, or I forget his name now, the Kodo writer, he summons a Kodo. I think like if you stick that guy on the board and you're just hero powering every turn, it's pretty hard to come back from that. Just getting a 3/5 for essentially nothing every turn. So when Inspire was very, very strong and we were making a bunch of Inspire decks that were super strong, it was not a fun experience to play against, really. It basically like the first person that sticks, like in a world where Inspire is very, very strong, and everyone's playing Inspire decks, it's really the first person that gets an Inspire something on the board and then starts, getting lots of power from it. It's super, super hard to come back from that. So it just wasn't really that fun of an experience. So we tried to make some Inspire cards that were a little bit narrower, where like the Druid 5/4, it's still a little bit snowbally, but it's less snowbally than just creating free minions or creating free legendaries like the priest one. But that was a little bit intentional, I would say, to not make those cards at a very super high power level, just because it just wasn't fun to play against. I think a lot in TGT specifically that I learned was a lot of those cards actually did make a pretty big impact. When people look back on Grand Tournament, they're like, oh, no one plays those cards. Well, I mean, statistically, they actually did. I think the problem was more a lot of cards that went in decks from TGT, they just didn't create new decks. They just sort of contributed to a deck that already existed. So, I mean, if you're playing Darnassus Aspirant in Druid, I mean, that's a TGT card, but it's Ramp Druid still. It's just the same deck. It's just a different card. You're playing against the same strategy. It doesn't feel different. So I think that's what happened to a lot of TGT cards that made the set feel like it didn't have as big of an impact. Whereas in League of Explorers, we just totally, flipped that, where all of our legendaries and all of our cards basically said, does this card build a new deck, or does this card do something that people haven't seen before that makes the game feel different? And especially with a card like Vano Jackson, like, of course it does that. And Elise's build around wasn't clear to a lot of people in the beginning, but I think people started to realize, like, oh, if I have Elise, I can just have 29 removal cards and Elise and, win control games. So in that way, it is actually a pretty build around card. And of course, with Old God did the same thing with stuff like N'Zoth and Cthulhu. So really learning from sort of the TGT experience for me was, it's very, very important to make cards that create new decks. That's where you should be targeting cards. It's not about, Shaman is underpowered, let's give Shaman just a strong standalone card, or any class really. It's not about that. It's about just creating new decks, which I think is the important piece.
Do you feel Old Gods made that goal easier or harder with with Standard coming out? With losing a large chunk of cards, that make it easier or more difficult to create cards that change things up?
I mean, probably easier, I think, for this particular one, was just because almost no matter what we did with Old Gods, things were going to be new. Because, I mean, basically every single deck outside, I think, like Dragon Priest, like Tempo Mage still lost some stuff, but it was essentially the same deck. And then Aggro Shaman, almost every deck that was seeing a wide amount of play, like over, say, 3% of total decks, like all of them lost a ton. So, I mean, even if Old Gods didn't come out, you'd still see a lot of change there, where Old Gods, impacted a lot. So you saw basically double the amount of change. But in terms of introducing variety, I think the switch from just having one format to having Standard and Wild, that really, that sort of changed things on its own.
Absolutely. So I think we're mostly done with questions, and we got to get you out of here soon. But I'm just curious to know what you're playing these days. Are you playing Standard or Wild, and what decks? Decks that you're really excited about?
I've been playing the Yogg and Load Hunter on
Standard.
Yes.
By the way, I was going to say, when we were
Love.
talking about Joust, that the King Zelik is like the Joust card that's still rocking, because it guarantees that you draw a Yogg, which is your win condition, right?
That's great.
So,
yeah. Well, actually, the last game I played, I jousted my Yogg and was against Cthulhu, so I was pretty sad.
Oh, that hurts so bad.
Whoops.
Yeah.
That was when you were like, maybe a tie should also
Maybe
win.
tie. We should have done tie.
No bias with that thought
No,
whatsoever.
Not at all. I've actually been playing. So the deck that I played the most of all decks in playtesting was Cthulhu Rogue, and I thought it was super strong to the point where I was a little bit worried about it. And then no one's playing it, so I still play a lot of Cthulhu Rogue on ladder, and it's extremely good. So I mean, maybe it'll catch on at some point, or maybe I'm just crazy.
1 or 2 Blade of Cthuns?
2 for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that card is really, really good in certain situations. But sometimes you're up against aggro, and you're like, well, I'll never be able to play this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about Cthulhu decks is you have to put in a lot of these Cthulhu cards that aren't, necessarily good on their own, like the 2/3 Vanilla and
Yeah.
The 4/2 Divine Shield's okay. The 3/6 Taunt for 5 is, pretty bad, not in a Cthulhu deck. But Rogue, you're just, hey, I'm going to put in 2 Blades of Cthulhu, and that's it. Like, no more Cthulhu cards. And my Cthulhu's are still, 30 attack minions because I'm like Shadow Stepping Blades. And so I think that deck is super strong. So I enjoy that one a lot. And of course, I throw Yagin as well. And you have Bran, so.
Of course.
So good.
Oh, I gotta have Bran in there.
In Wild, I play N'Zoth Paladin as well, just because it's totally absurd. It's like having Sledge Belchers with N'Zoth just doesn't seem fair sometimes.
Oh, man.
Oh, God, yeah.
There's a couple
I'm
more.
so
cool
glad that card
death
is
rattle
gone.
options. Yeah, I was actually talking about that the other day. I was playing, and I was trying to mess with. I made an OTK Shaman that runs, Thorson, Leroy, Double Rockbiter, Wind Fury, and Faceless, which is you can do 48 damage if you get all the cards. So basically, you can actually kill warriors with a bunch of health or anything. But I was like, you know what makes this deck good? No Sledge Belcher. Because I don't have to get through 2 taunts at once.
That's a problem for, your... we actually bring up OTK Shaman deck a lot because, it's funny you mentioned that. Because, like, Leroy, Wind Fury, Rockbiter, you've been able to do that forever, right?
Forever, yeah. Chalky beat me in a tournament with that, years ago.
Yeah, so...
it's still a thing.
And it was never really a problem. Like, it never caught on because it's just not consistent enough.
Yeah.
So when because inevitably there's OTK stuff you can do, like I can Shadow Step a bunch of Blades and then, have 100 attack Cthulhu. That is possible. It's just not very consistent. So that's kind of a baseline that we're looking at when like, oh, this is an OTK deck and it's new. Is it easier or harder to do than Leroy, Rockbiter, Wind Fury? Because if it's harder than that, it's probably not going to catch on. So it's been a baseline actually for a really long time.
Yeah, it's like 5 cards that all have to be discounted. And it's tough to get off.
It doesn't seem that difficult, but it obviously has been too difficult to really catch on.
Yeah. But although now, you've got so many removal options in Shaman. That's why I started.
And the Sledge Belcher.
Yeah, and no Sledge Belcher, exactly. But yeah, no, that's cool. I think in Wild, I'm still kind of struggling to find a deck that I'm really excited about, but I'm still very excited that Wild exists because it allows you guys to design some crazy stuff without worrying about it. And then in 2 expansions, it's going to be all just nuts.
Over time, it's just going to be totally crazy. A lot of people talked about, why isn't Pilot Shredder getting nerfed? And why isn't Sledge Belcher getting nerfed? Like, is there no concern really for Wild balance? And my sort of view on that is that the card pool is going to be so large with Wild. I think the most powerful decks you're going to see are just going to be extremely, extremely synergistic. Decks. So I'm talking about sort of decks like all decks are going to be like Miracle Rogue or Freeze Mage, and in decks that are really synergistic like that, they don't really care about standalone value cards. Like there's no room for Paladin Shredder in Freeze Mage. Like all they care about is freezing you and drawing cards and completing their strategy. And I think over time, the cards are going to be like you're going to be able to have so much synergy in Wild because the card pool is so large that it's not really necessary to nerf cards like Paladin Shredder and Sledge Belcher just because you're going to be mostly in a combo environment, I think.
Yeah.
Which is pretty fun, really, because all the crazy combos that people are going to do are just going to be like totally wild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted from Wild. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to. I just started dipping my toe in the Wild, and because I was originally just incredibly excited about Standard. So it's pretty much all I was playing after the launch, but I just recently started kind of tooling around with it, and man, I could stay there for a while and have a good time.
Yeah, it's fun. It's super fun.
Yeah,
I'm playing Pirate Warrior in Wild and Standard too.
Nice.
Pirate Warrior is like my aggro deck of choice right now.
It's really, really fun, yeah. And
Super
sometimes
good,
you just
too.
take people by surprise because you don't realize how fast you can make that Fiery War Axe into an Arcanite Reaper,
Yeah.
We had Pirate Warrior make it into the finals of our Fireside Gathering over the weekend.
Nice.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite decks to play right now.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
super,
so
super fun.
Pirate Warrior, do you have Sky Captain? Yay or nay?
I have 3 Pirate Warrior decks on live, and one of them has Sky Captain, yeah.
Whoa.
Yes.
All right.
Totally awesome. Well, Dean, you've been more than gracious with your time. We always love getting to talk to you. Before we let you go, where can people find you around the interwebs so they can keep up to date?
I don't I think I'm Iksar HS on Twitter. Pretty sure
Yes.
that's the title.
You
Yes,
you
all right,
are
that's correct.
indeed Iksar HS. That's
If you
IKSAR.
ever post anything on Reddit, I will read it. I think I read the first 3 pages of Reddit every single day.
How do you go to sleep at night?
It's not that bad. People are some positive and some not, but that's okay.
He crushes like 15 people in a row with the Cthulhu rogue and then goes to sleep just fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
it's
right, all right, fine.
I love reading all the stuff. It's really, really good. So, I mean, if you ever post anything there, I'm on the official forums every so often. I try to post as much as I can on Reddit as well. Like, interacting with the community is really important. A lot of the times, the community has really awesome ideas. So, I go to Custom Hearthstone all the time. It's a really awesome Reddit. If any of you guys haven't been, it's literally a Reddit dedicated to people creating awesome Hearthstone designs, which, as you can imagine, is pretty pertains to my interests.
Sure.
Yeah, so and competitive HS as well. So I read all the Reddits and all the stuff there. And if you want to contact me on Twitter, I'm always answering and trying to be helpful there as well.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you again, Dean, and we'll get to wrangle you back on the show sometime in the near future.
Yeah, anytime. You guys know how to get in touch with me, and I love being on the show. So anytime.
Oh, great. Have
I'm
a
going
good
to
one.
bend your ear about all sorts of other stuff later on. So
Yeah, hit me up about the arena stuff. I'd love
right,
to
let's
hear
do
what you have to say.
let's do it. And I want your Cthulhu rogue list. All right.
All right, yeah, no, I'll send it to you. I'll send it to all you guys.
Yeah,
It's
please
good, promise.
CC us on that. Thanks.
All right,
Have a good one, Dean.
all right, take it easy.
See ya. Oh, well, and big thanks to him. Big thanks to the Hearthstone community team for putting that together for us. We always appreciate getting to sit down with one of the devs.
We hit him with some questions that weren't on the list, and he was very gracious to not berate us for doing so.
What
Answer
what
as
more?
truthfully as he could.
Yeah.
But
We didn't
yeah, no,
see
he's.
Lindsay sprint into the
I know,
room, so I
yeah.
think we did okay.
I was like hoping to not see like shifting eyes, like someone's in the back, like no. But yeah, no, he's one of the coolest guys you're ever going to meet over at Blizzard, and super smart when it comes to gaming. And John, I mean, StarCraft was where you kind of came across him in the first place, Garrett.
Yeah. I heard from Dean back when he was, I think he was just a QA tester, I think is how he got his start at Blizzard. And he wrote in literally just to say he liked the show back when in the early days of
super cool.
StarCast. And he was the first Blizzard employee I ever talked to. And we're losing our minds. And it's funny now because he's like, dude, I was just a QA tester at the time. You shouldn't have been that excited. But clearly, we should have been because now he's designing Hearthstone. So
Super smart guy.
been really awesome to know Dean and kind of see him come up through the ranks. So excited, happy for that guy. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. So before we move on, want to remind our patrons over at patreon.com/TAC that we are going to have our next patron hangout, not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday, May 25th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Same time we go live for the regular Angry Chicken on Tuesdays. So call in for that. If you haven't looked that up, the info is up for our patrons right now over at patreon.com/TAC. And also want to remind all of our listeners that this episode is sponsored by Squarespace.com. Use the code TAC at checkout over at Squarespace. You get 10% off your first order, and you will gain access to one of the best website building tools out there. Use Squarespace for all of my websites. I love them to death. Dills uses it. Jocelyn uses it. Kyle uses it. Every single person in A-Move, whether we are sponsored by them or not, uses Squarespace. So we highly recommend them and dig their service. So go check it out. Use the code TAC.
You know what else that code TAC gets you, Garrett?
A warm hug if you come up at CreateCon and say, hey
No,
guys, I
use
use
the
that
code TAC. You will get a lifetime supply of fruit leathers. I don't know if you know this.
I don't know what that is.
Really? You don't know? But okay, well, how about this? Code TAC will also get you a bicycle built not for 2, but for 3. That's right, you and 2 loved ones can bike around town in style with this epic tricycle from threesomebikeco.com.
I don't think that's a thing they get.
I think it pretty much is, but you know what else? If you use the code TAC, Garrett and Jocelyn, you will also win a trip for you and your family to Papua New Guinea.
That's
That's
definitely
right. You will be whisked away
That is-
on Scat Airlines to the luxurious half island where you'll scuba dive and get an all-expense trip to the infamous Papua New Guinea Snake Man. With over 1,000 snake-related deaths a year in Papua New Guinea, you're really going to want to pay attention to what he says while you go hunting for deadly venomous snakes in the grasslands.
You're really gonna
a
wanna
trip
pay
you and your family are unlikely to ever forget.
You're
That's right. Use code TAC.
Really going to want to pay attention to me when I say that is not what you get when you use the
I'm
code
pretty
TAC.
sure you get that. I was reading the small, the fine print.
But you do get 10% off your first order at Squarespace.
Yeah, and you get a trip to New Guinea.
No, you don't.
I feel like this is a reference that's just going way over my head right now.
Look, people, you get more than you pay for. That's the point. So
Right.
Use the code TAC.
Right. You get more than you pay for, exactly 10% more than you paid for just on Squarespace, and having nothing to do with destination vacations to poisonous snake-infested exotic locales. With that in mind, let's move right into this week's Hearthstone news.
Good news, everyone!
Oh, gotta shake that off. That was delightfully wacky. Just a reminder, folks, I want to remind you guys about our subreddit where we took some of the questions for today's interview with Mr. Dean. Is over at tacpodcast.reddit.com. Go there and say nice things, because Reddit already has enough mean things. Taco Spring is complete. Jocelyn, how did it go?
It was pretty fantastic. So we used a new service this time. We casted on Sunday night. We did the finals, Dills and I. It was a lot of fun. Congrats to our winner. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. Bruton, who took down his formidable opponent, Clinch 3-0. So we had another 3-0 sweep in the finals. It was pretty crazy because before the finals, Dills and I were just chatting it up and talking about how we thought it was going to go really long because there's a really long meta and these guys fought their way through 6 rounds of crazy Hearthstone fun. So, and then it was a 3-0 and we're kind of like, oh, all right. Longer games this time, though. We weren't done in 25 minutes, so that was good.
Yeah. It was. I mean, it was still a good finals.
It was great.
It wasn't like the games were completely one-sided. It just kind of ended up that I think Clinch he played Zoo once and then he played the Paladin twice.
Yes.
You should go check out the VODs though. It's pretty fun. There's some good stuff in there, and we kind of talked through like some of what may have been, the turning points in those matches. And poor Clinch, he'll come back strong next time. He's one of my personal patrons, and we were all very excited for him to be in the finals. And he went back and watched the VODs and was like, oh, man, if I'd just done this and that. And I was like, I feel you, dude. I know that feel. But, they all did a great job. Everybody who played in it did a great job. And thanks to everybody who participated, patrons and non-patrons. It was fantastic.
I think you guys did a really good job, and I have to thank you personally on air for covering for me while I was attending a double family birthday.
Woo, birthdays.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dills mentioned the VODs of the finals. They're up on Twitch right now. They're going to be up on YouTube probably tomorrow. I have a little bit of editing to do on that side, but they will be going up on YouTube. So if that's what you're looking for, that's where you find it. There's actually deck lists and also some advice on both playing in the tournament and prep up on our subreddit right now. So go check that out because the players who finished, I think, in the top 8, there's been a lot of them that have been putting up posts trying to help other people prep for not only this tournament but other tournaments and next taco. So there's a lot of really, really good information and good conversations going on. So you should really, if you're looking for tournament prep help, then the subreddit is definitely the place to go because there's a lot of really nice people volunteering their time and their deck lists over there.
Yeah.
So
It's very cool that people are posting them. I'd like to see Jury to post his deck list of what he brought that got him out in the first round again.
I'd like to see Jury not suck.
Yeah.
I'd
Jury's
really
out in the first round every time.
I'd really like to see
I think
that.
we should have the official out in the first round jury award that we'll give to everybody.
I think we need.
Everybody who gets
Participation
eliminated in the first
award,
round gets a special award.
Yeah, we'll have to get John to make him a consolation mug.
Yeah.
It will be cracked. You will cut your mouth if you drink from it. But it will be a consolation mug. So
Oh man.
enjoy it. Sorry, Justin. You can reap your revenge when you come here for CreateCon in July.
I think honestly he's just a busy man. So he signs up because he wants to sign up, and he just dumps to his first round opponent because he's got stuff to do.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that's what's going on.
That's exactly what's going on.
His pet cockatiel just flies and pecks him in the eye, and he misplays in the first
you
round.
can't play Hearthstone with Dr. Bird on your shoulder.
No, you can't do that. He like poops on your nose, and you're like, oh, gross, and you make another misplay, and it's bad. It's bad.
All because of the poop on your nose. Got it.
Exactly. Happens to me all the time. You know how many times I misplay in Hearthstone? Because this is true because I yell at my Chihuahua for sniffing cats' butts. Yeah, happens all the time. all the time.
I see. Also, if you guys are interested, all the stats for the tournament actually are over on Battlefy. It is 100% just automatic. The service just does it when people enter what their classes are, and then it tracks all the win rates and stuff all the way through with the bans. And there's so many cool stats over on Battlefy for the tournament. So if you're interested, you can go and check out our show notes because the links to everything, it's all in there, deck lists and the Battlefy stats. So it was such a dream to work with Battlefy this time. And there's a lot of really cool stuff that came out of it. So make sure you check that out. Also, we're putting the call out because I had a really long weekend doing taco. So if there is anyone who has any kind of experience doing admin work for tournaments or, like marketing stuff, just really anything, if you guys want to help out and volunteer for taco, I would really, really appreciate it. So if you'd like to email tactournament@gmail.com with kind of like any of your experience, and I don't have the exact dates for the next taco tournament, but I could use some help even in, heading up to the tournament to kind of get some stuff set up. We have some really cool ideas for what we'd like to do with the community tournament, and I've really hit my limit of stuff I can do by myself. So if you guys, anyone listening to my voice right now wants to help out with the tournament, it would be very much appreciated. So yeah, just hit me up, tactournament@gmail.com.
Yep, probably best to include volunteers somewhere in the subject line.
Yes, absolutely.
Make filtering those out a lot easier. But yeah, I hear people on Twitter and in the chat room all the time asking, "Hey, you guys need help?" Well, this is our official call for help.
Yes.
tactournament@gmail.com if you want to be an admin for the next taco.
And let me know the kind of stuff that you want to do, because there's a whole bunch of different things that kind of encompass taco. There's, like I mentioned, marketing. So like putting up posts on Twitter and Reddit and managing all that kind of stuff. There's managing the actual adminning of the tournament. There's doing things like video production, because we're talking about maybe streaming some different matches. And then there's also like other admin roles that are like checking over deck lists, which is one of our like most requested, I guess, features of the tournament, is people would really like to have to submit deck lists so that they know that their opponent isn't switching between 4 different Warlock decks or, stuff like that. So just things, there's such a wide range of things that can be done within the tournament. So if you've got any experience in any of that or have any kind of interest in expanding your horizons, please let me know, because I could use a hand.
Yeah. Let me just point out, though, to people that the deck list thing isn't as airtight as you might think it is, and it's probably not a big deal. Like at DreamHack, we were submitting a deck list. There's no way for them to know in my match if I was playing the exact deck unless something came up. And the opponent doesn't know anyway. So just don't worry about that, guys.
Yeah, it's there as a fail-safe. It's there to refer back to if something is called in the challenge. We're not going to sit there watch every single game that every single person plays and make sure that every single card that they drop was in there. That's insane. It's unrealistic, and unfortunately, you have to go by the honor system.
Yep.
Well, it's more so that like if people have to submit deck lists, we could have one central tournament account that could potentially at any point jump in and spectate your game. And then if you get caught playing with something that's not on your deck list, so it's like it's just the constant, kind of not threat, but knowledge that your deck list could be verified at any point, or maybe not. Just like having that extra little bit of
it doesn't hurt,
reassurance.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt, but it's like I think a lot of people get a little bit too concerned with that kind of stuff.
Too caught up on that,
Make sure your decks are good and you're playing good and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Yep. So, anyways, in terms of not as nearly big and awesome and momentous tournaments, we also had the HCT European Spring Preliminaries over the weekend. And so we have our top 8 for that. Complexity got the most players in. They got Crane and Loyan in. And honestly, things didn't look too crazily different from previous weekend at DreamHack Austin, although we did see a lot more Reno lock.
Yeah, I think Zoo was definitely much less popular. Still, a lot of people are playing that Tempo Warrior, but it didn't seem to do so hot, and I think that actually the N'Zoth Paladin didn't do as hot either. I really feel like we're going to start to see those decks start to exit the tournament meta, and some new stuff kind of take their place. We didn't see a whole bunch of crazy new stuff, but a lot of these players were just played fantastic. Osaka barely didn't make it at the end. He was in the final match. I think a lot of people were rooting for him, but he played against, who was it? It was Casey, and Casey was playing fantastic. So Or no, it was Einer, I think.
Poor Osaka.
Yeah, that's what I said to Garrett when he was putting the notes in. I'm like, yeah, EU Spring Prelims, aka poor Osaka.
Yeah. Well, the thing was, he was playing the Miracle Rogue deck, and you saw firsthand why it's not a deck that's ever going to completely overpower the meta, because he just didn't draw Auctioneers. Yeah. And once you don't draw Auctioneers, you start to play these weird plays. You try to stall as long as you can and hope that you'll eventually get there, but sometimes if it's in the bottom 10 of your deck or the bottom 5 of your deck, you're just not going to win. So some of the takeaways, though, Loyan is kind of making a name for himself, Shaman Specialist, who popularized the first version of the mid-range Shaman with the Bloodlust and everything.
Yep.
He's moved on to the kind of the totem-heavy Shaman with what's the card that does the Primal Fusion or whatever? He had that card in there. And then I was really excited to see this guy Casey play, because he plays at lightning speed and doesn't misplay ever. It was crazy. It was like he knew the moment it was his turn to go, what exactly he wanted to do. He'd analyzed everything at that point, and he just pop. He just does it all and just crushes his opponents. So I'm excited to see where that guy ends up going. But yeah, really, really cool stuff. Watch the VODs for sure, everybody, if you haven't seen them.
Yeah. A lot more well-known names kind of popping up in this top 8, I think, overall, and just this tournament overall, than kind of what we saw at DreamHack. But I'm
really just glad that there's a bunch of new players. The way Blizzard has embraced this open tournament format has really created a lot of new names, and it's exciting because if you look at Hearthstone 2 years ago when we were, kind of just starting this podcast and the game was just kind of coming out of beta and becoming actually available. It was just the same names every single tournament, and things got a little bit stale. So it is no longer that. We now have new fresh names every single tournament, and these guys they're all fantastic players.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, still quite a few Zulaks being played. Three of the top 8 were playing Zoo, and the other 5 were playing Reno Lock. So. Man, you think we will ever reach a point where Warlock, just in general, whether it's Zoo, whether it's Reno, whether it's a different type, isn't extremely popular?
No. It's hero power too good, man.
Yeah.
It creates so many different ways to play that class, It's
that was my thought as well, but I just wanted to put it out into the Dills and Jocelyn universe. So
I mean, Handlock's probably dead, but
yeah.
Without Molten Giants, Handlock is just nowhere near what it was. But
you honestly, you get a similar kind of bizarre play with Reno. I think it's not. I don't think the soul of it's gone forever. You'll still see a Mountain Giant from every now and then. You'll still
is true.
You'll still see a defender of Argus come down between a Mountain Giant and a Twilight Drake and go, oh man, how the hell am I going to deal with this?
But double Ancient Watchers, double Owl, double Molten, double Mountain. That. Nope. Handlock is dead.
That's not happening.
Sad face.
Is not happening. You're fine, Warlocks. Everyone calm down.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Totally fine. You have 2 archetypes right now that are tournament ready.
But who has a lot of archetypes right now is Warrior, dude. They have like 4.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
What by the way, rewind back like 9 months. Like this wasn't really a thing.
It was basically Patron. And then sometimes Kit Kats might show up with Control Warrior, or Fibonacci or somebody.
Yeah, hell, rewind back before BlackRock, before Patron was invented. It was literally just Control Warrior, and we had multiple episodes. We were sitting here like, man, they really need to do something to Warrior because there's only one type of Warrior to play, and it's kind of boring. And it was that and Priest. It was always us being like, man, Warrior only has one archetype, and Priest has none.
Priest has 0 archetypes. Yeah. By the way, Priest actually has some interesting stuff going on now. You can actually play OTK Priest.
Yep.
With the Velen's Chosen, you can play Super Control Priest, or you can play like N'Zoth Priest. I've been messing around with this Priest that is just all removal and Elise, and it's actually pretty damn good because you can just never let them get anywhere. And then when you get down to the end and you play Elise, you just tend to win the game because suddenly it's like, oh yeah, but now I'm just going to start dumping legendaries on the board. So Priest is in a good spot right now. I don't think it's actually as bad as some people have been saying.
I think Priest is great.
I feel bad for Hunter.
Yeah, well, you have
Hunter will
Yogg.
be fine.
You have Yoggenload, which is
Yoggenload.
just
Yeah.
awesome as all get out.
It's fun and it's actually good. I think it's actually the best version of Hunter. But there is the mid-range Hunter still going around. It's like a very
Yeah, but
beast-centric
mid-range
mid-range
is getting
Hunter.
really clobbered right now.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe you're just not playing it right. No, you probably
No,
are.
I don't mean me with mid-range. I just
Well-
mean in general.
Mid-range will trounce the combo decks, but yeah, it's going to struggle against
Yeah,
aggro, and it's going to
yeah.
struggle against,
And control too. So,
Super
and that's
control.
pretty much right now. The ladder is like control and aggro, and then mid-range is like, please, please,
I just want to put a minion on the board and
exactly.
do something.
Please don't kill my face before I get a minion out, or just damn it, let me have my minion.
The mid-range Hunter is fine. It's just, it depends on what the meta of the day is,
I am
got
okay with
strong
all of
tools.
this. Hunter was had its place in the sun forever up until this point. They can take a backseat for a little while.
Sure.
I'm okay with
I'm
it.
with you. I got Golden Hunter already. I don't care. Whatever.
Exactly.
I ain't
Exactly.
playing
Well, the
that.
game's not going to give you anything for going
Yeah.
further. So
Yeah,
salt,
true.
salt, shake. Before we take a crazy game story and then lead into emails, let's thank our patrons over at patreon.com/TAC for directly supporting us, for being our number one source of support and just being all around generally awesome people. This episode, thank you Marlon D, Chad W, Christopher, Justin H, Adam M, Braska, Andrew H.E., unfortunately not Andrew W.K., because then we would just be partying hard, and Derek L. Thank you guys so much. No one had a ridiculously funny, silly name this week.
Oh, so sad.
I know. Every now and then, we just, someone doesn't make some type of weird fart joke in their name. So, let's take a crazy game story.
The whole world gone crazy.
You're in trouble now.
You got it.
Fun fact, that's actually the same exact reaction I have when I listen to someone slapping the bass. You can send
I
your,
was really tempted when I made that bumper to actually cut the Jirax's death and then restart it so it was even longer because it was just so funny how long it was. But I was like, I think this might be funnier with like another 2 seconds. Jirax's death. I literally had that moment where I was like, is this funny enough or should it be a little bit longer? I think it's fine though.
I think it's long enough. I think
it's really long.
definitely long
When you
enough.
pay attention to how long it is, it's really long.
It's kind of ridiculous.
Oftentimes you hear that sound while, things are exploding and fireworks are going off, so you don't really notice it as much. But
Yeah, but when you're
you hear
out for
it all
your
on its own.
when you're out for your morning jog, listening to your favorite Hearthstone podcast, it's probably kind of like, am I about to be murdered? Well, our crazy game story comes to us today from Splice. By the way, you can send your crazy game stories to tacpodcast@gmail.com. And Splice writes, Dear Apoplectic, how do you say that?
I don't know.
Apoplectic.
I was just gonna say you guys have to stop
I know
sending
the
in
word.
all the different crazy ways to say angry chicken, but then just Dill's just showed us why it's. So
I was
great when you
overcome
do
with anger
that.
while saying that word, which is actually what it means.
Apoplectic avians is what I will say. And he continues, I am a priest player, so I appreciate a good milkshaking. I think you can define the goal of the milkshake deck as trying to defeat your opponent with their own cards. Well, today I ran into the opposite, a player who is trying to win with any cards other than their own. I queued into a Warlock and got ready to face off against Zoo. I go first. On turn 1, he Void Walkers. So far, so normal. On turn 2, he taps. On turn 3, he senses demons. Something is afoot. I respond by thought stealing and getting 2 Warlock cards that look like normal Zoo. I'm confused at this point. Then, on turn 4, he renounces darkness and his hero power becomes Shaman. Here we go. I prepared to face an army of totems, but on the next turn, he plays our favorite Murloc, Sir Finley Murgleton, and gets the Druid hero power. For the record, I am now facing off against a Warlock with Shaman cards and the Druid hero power. It's like some bizarre Hearthstone chimera. But the insanity didn't end. After a few turns, he plays Lee Starseeker and shuffles a map in. Then he plays the Charged Hammer, and after a few turns with that little gem, he goes from having the Druid hero power to the Shaman 2 damage hero power. So For the record, at this point, he's had 4 different hero powers. Also, I'm running Shifting Shades and Thought Steals. I am now holding in my hand a mix of Priest, Warlock, and Shaman cards. And seeing as I'm Thought Stealing his cards that randomly transformed, I actually know more about what's in his deck than he does. This isn't even your normal meta match. After the game shifts to the late game, he then decides, well, I'm tired of these Shaman cards, and then plays the Golden Monkey to get all legendaries. So, for the record, he had 4 hero powers, shuffled his entire deck to random cards twice. I ended up winning, but it was a close match that ended when I entombed his Anomalous. This is why I play Hearthstone, signed Splice.
Nice. That's a great...
It's
That's
a
a
great
great
story.
crazy game story right there.
Dear God, I loved this. Also, the way you wrote it, Splice, just beautiful.
I unfortunately had music going when I played a game the other day that I really, really want to make a YouTube video about, but I was listening to punk rock at the time, so it won't work on YouTube really. But I could make it like I can like not monetize it or whatever, probably. But
you could do that, or you could mute it and commentary over it.
yeah, I guess that's true. But I was on tilt on the ladder. I was tilting hard. So I was like, all right, we're going into Wild. We're playing all legendaries. And so I had all legendaries against the Control Warrior. And then at some point I Golden Monkeyed and turned all my legendaries into new legendaries. And it was amazing. So yeah, I get it, Splice. These kind of games are super fun. And I think Renounce, I think it's actually a card that, like I said on this when we first were talking about it, I think it's a card that could possibly one day be good. But you have to you have to play a deck that's super weird to like really find a way to make it work.
Yep. But that is really cool.
Yeah.
Really
this is amazing.
Cool. So.
And this is true. This is like Hearthstone at this point has the potential where all the classes are not themselves anymore and everyone can do crazy stuff.
It's like Halloween.
Awesome.
Everyone's dressing up as other classes.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
Can't do that in Magic. You can't start out as, a black-blue deck and then end up playing, red-white. It doesn't work. It's not going to work.
No.
Really
I mean, you can try. Good luck.
It'd be really difficult. I can't even think of the cards that might make that happen. But
you do some really bad 50-50 split between your mana colors and hope for the best.
you can play 5 colors. There actually are decks that play 5 colors.
Yeah, I know, but
they're ridiculous.
As a that doesn't compute with a limited player. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, what 5 colors?
What perfect scenario did I just fall into where I get to play a 5-color deck?
You play the 5-color sliver deck, man. It's badass.
Well, let's wrap this up with some emails.
Hello?
Hello, it's me.
Hello?
Just quickly, do you get my message?
Yep.
Oh.
Hello, brother.
Send them to the same place, tacpodcast@gmail.com. Cactus Righteous writes in and says, top of the morning, you crazy cluckers. First, I have to say I'm a huge fan of the show. I've been listening since the Nax release. I currently have 7 out of 9 golden heroes with Rogue and Priest remaining. I decided Miracle and Death Rattle Rogue would be my best bet. Day 1 of the release, I crafted Zeril and went on my merry way. After playing quite a few games and playing a ton of Zeril, even getting him from Journey Below almost every time, and shadow casting him for the maximum poison potential, it got me wondering if there's actually a way to draw for the poisons. It seems like most of the time I get the +3 attack and conceal, and less frequently the draw card poisons. But now I've settled into Miracle Rogue, it seems frustrating that I very rarely get the 2 damage poison, especially when you're eking out every point of damage to keep the Miracle alive and finish your opponent. Just wondering if you guys or anyone else has had this experience, or maybe I just have terrible luck.
I was actually kind of hoping that Iksar was still going to be on by the time we got to emails, so because this is definitely more of a Blizzard central
There's
question.
no way that they've waited.
No.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that you just have terrible luck.
I'm 99.9% sure that you're having terrible luck.
Yeah. Because I had a few games at DreamHack. I had a game where I was playing the Miracle Rogue and I played Zeril, and I had already like 8 cards in my hand, and I was really hoping to get damage or +3 attack or something like that, or even the conceal would have been great. Both of them were the draw 1 card, and I was like, I can't play Auctioneer and then do this. I'll draw too many cards. I was like, these are the worst right now. And so like Zeril will sometimes give it and sometimes take it away. That's just any kind of random card is going to have those swings. And over a long enough time period, you will see the same amount of each one, likely, or close to.
And chat room right now saying, I always get the draw card. I always get the draw card.
Everyone's going to have their circumstantial evidence where they, this is what I saw.
Yeah.
So this must be how it works. No.
So just to recap, he thinks it's favored in the way of the plus attack and the stealth poison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tweet to Iksar, formulated and sent.
See, King Louis is just saying it in the chat. I always get smork jugglers. So, I could say, oh, well, Blizzard has clearly weighted jugglers to always go face. I mean,
it's like the
every
Huffer
time I
joke.
play Flame Juggler, it goes face. I don't understand why it always goes face. And same thing with my Knife Jugglers. When I play them, it was a thing when I was doing because I played all Zoo pretty much last season. And I was just like, why the Smork Juggles? And same thing with the Flame Waker. It seems like they always go friggin' face. So I'm just somehow cursed in that particular brand of RNG, but I know that it's not. I know that it's just, this is what's happening now. Over the lifetime of me playing Hearthstone, it will even out.
Yep. Every time I play Animal Companion, I get Huffer. Even though I don't.
Yeah. Every time I play Call of the Wild, I get Huffer. It's crazy.
Yeah, what? That doesn't sound random.
Yep. Next email, Dills?
Sure. This comes from Clayacus. All right. Hey, guys. I was an early beta tester for Hearthstone and recently returned to the game at Whisper's release after quitting when Naxxramas came out due to what I perceived as a stagnant metagame that Blizzard had no interest in changing. Disagree with Blizzard having no interest in changing it, but yes, it was stagnant. I have been delighted to find that Hearthstone now has a healthy and diverse metagame with lots of different deck types for each class, and a huge community devoted to studying and playing the game that just wasn't there when I was playing in beta. Patrick just appeared out of nowhere. Who would have thought that Shaman would ever be playable, let alone a top class? So my question is, people who know what they're talking about seem to like ancestral knowledge. I think Dills even had it in his recent Shaman deck. Everything I know about card economy tells me this card is junk. I'm paying 4 mana to increase my hand by 1. Can you explain why I should ever include this in Shaman decks? Yeah.
Because it's freaking troll, Knoll,
Trog.
Yeah, it buffs your Trog.
I couldn't think of the name for a second.
First of all, it buffs your Trog, and second of all, you can now actually release the Overload.
Yep.
2 different ways.
Yep.
So essentially, you can get 2 cards for 2, and drawing 2 cards for 2 is really, really good. But not to mention, even if you can't do that, draw cards, thin your deck out, and get you to the good stuff, which is, if you could make a deck that was 20 cards and everybody else had a deck that was 30 cards, you'd probably win every single time. Because you put 20 more powerful cards, and they put 20 powerful cards and then 10 other cards that are less powerful, right? So it's I know it's a weird concept, but it's basically like there's never going to be 30 cards that are all the most powerful cards, right? So you have to kind of find ways to fit things in and out and find ways to get to them. So I think Arcane Intellect and Mage, it's not just that you're drawing 2 cards, it's also that you've got a card in there that when you get it gets you to the better cards, right? So it's like a necessary, or tracking. Like tracking seems terrible, right? I throw 2 cards away. What? Why would I ever want to do that? Because you get to the card you really need faster and more efficiently. So.
Yep.
Well, yeah, because the less cards that you have in your deck, the more likely you are to pull something that you want, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Secret Paladin was a huge example of this. You play your 6-drop that pulls 5 secrets out of your deck. Now suddenly you're less likely to draw 1-mana secret cards the rest of the game. You're much more likely to draw high-impact cards the rest of the game, which was one of the reasons why that deck was so powerful. It thinned your deck out just by default.
Took all the bad stuff.
Crap.
Yeah,
exactly. And played a bunch of crap all in one turn. So it's, and the thing is too, Overload may seem like, oh man, this is a draw 2 for 4. Yes, but paying 2 mana now and 2 mana later is actually comparable to paying 3 mana all at once, because you are allowed to now fit something extra, 1 more mana into the turn where you played it rather than Mage. So you can do a couple things. Like Garrett immediately said, you buff your Trog, but also you can also now find turns where you shift the board in a much more meaningful fashion. You gain tempo faster on a specific turn. And yes, you pay for it on the next turn, but that turn might have been enough to flip the board for you in the first place. So
card draw is always an exceptionally powerful thing. This is true of just about every card game out there. It's very true here in Hearthstone. I like card draw because one of the most frustrating things for me personally is having a bad starting hand, and card draw can help you fix an awkward hand. It's not guaranteed that it'll be enough to make you come back and win the game, but it's more of a chance you would have had without it.
Yeah, and also the thing is, you're not going to keep this card in your opening hand, really. Like, if you get it, fine, that's fine. But what this card really does is it gets you, like, let's say you draw it on turn 7. Now I pay 2 mana, draw 2 cards, and I have 5 mana left to do stuff, right? Whereas if I draw this card on turn 7 as a mage and it's Arcane Intellect, I pay 3 mana, I have 4 mana left to do stuff. It's a card that you want to draw later because it then gets you to, like, the burst you need to finish the game or useful minions or something like that. So Overload is a tricky thing to really wrap your head around, but it's every single card that does Overload, you might end up overall paying more for it than you would in another class once both turns are said and done, but you paid less for it on the initial turn and got more powerful effects right away. So it's like credit cards, right?
Yeah.
I get what I need now. Yes, I pay a little bit more later, but if I didn't have it now,
worth.
If you use them correctly, they can help you. If you use them
that
wrong,
life tempo. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you use them wrong, you will concede your bank account.
Yeah. If you like D-Day did when we were playing out on my porch, you do not coin this card out on turn 1, forcing you to then skip turn 2.
Oh, D-Day.
That is using credit cards
incorrectly.
I thought you were just about to start publicly shaming D-Day for bad credit card usage that I wasn't
That's
aware
what I thought too. Don't be like D-Day and max out 10 credit cards.
Buy tickets to CreateCon and DreamHack. You just do CreateCon, people.
You're damn right. GreatConvention.net. Real quick to go back to Captain Righteous, confirmed from Iksar. That is placebo, sir. That is not. It is not weighted. So confirmed from Hearthstone designer. Zeryl's poisons are equal chance of finding.
Equally random.
Yeah, equally random. All right, final email, Jocelyn.
This one comes to us from Buck, and he says, "Howdy, hostile hens. I'm hoping you can help me determine if I'm a crafty player or a bad person. I was in the arena and noticed my opponent was playing slowly for no good reason. He didn't have complex turns to ponder, just idle, idle, play fast, idle. Fast forward to turn 9, I'm losing badly until my shifter Xeris becomes Nosdormu. I'm looking at the card, I know I'm going to play it, and I also know my opponent is tabbed out. Is it fair to hold the card to the end of my rope to increase the chance of my opponent missing his turn? Is it fine to play the person and not just the game? Take this line of play further. If I don't like aggro decks, is it fair to rope every turn and remove the incentive of getting through the game fast from aggro players?" So, no, you're not a bad person. You're playing the game. This is playing the person is definitely part of playing the game. And if you notice that your opponent is constantly tabbed out, then, making him hear the rope sound and just kind of be like, oh, whatever, this guy's taking forever, and not tab back right away, then absolutely, sure. Why not play the person? And I do think that it's kind of cute that you think that one person roping all the time will just impact all aggro players.
Yes.
Okay, his first thing about playing those Dormu late in the turn, I'm on board.
Yeah.
But the second thing about roping every turn because you're playing against an aggro deck makes you a bad person. Yeah. The guy playing aggro isn't the bad person. You are the bad person. Roping every turn is not something you should do just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
If you're actually sitting there thinking through your turn, because it's you want to make sure you're making the best turn every time, that's fine because not everyone thinks at the same speed, or some people like to consider more options, things like that. But dude, come on, don't do that. Don't rope just for the sake of roping.
Just for the sake of roping, yeah. I mean, like we've said a lot of times, because some people get upset when their opponents rope on turn 1, and sometimes turn 1 is actually the best time to do it, to take those 2 minutes and just kind of think over what you're going to do during the game and who you're facing and what a good strategy is going to be. Taking the time then when you actually don't have a lot of other decisions to make, that's a good strategy. But just roping every single turn for the sake of roping every single turn, sad face, dude. Sad face.
I encourage people not to do that.
Yep.
I mean, if you do it, you're going to do it. It's just like people who say, wow, every single time I do something. You're not going to stop them from doing that. So people just want to do it. But I hope people don't do it. if I had my choice.
I use WoW almost exclusively for when my knife juggler knives go exactly where I don't want them to be.
Yeah.
That's when I use WoW.
I will
I
admit
miss
I use
Sorry.
WoW to BM sometimes. Like if I know I have lethal and a guy does all this stuff on his turn, but I know I'm just gonna kill him anyway. At the end of all this stuff, sometimes I'll just throw in a WoW real quick. Like, that was amazing what you did, all that stuff. Leroy Jank! And then,
WoW is so much worse than Sorry.
I know. Was that
Yep.
really their intent? We missed an opportunity to ask Iksar about that. If that was their intent, swing and a miss. Blizzard.
I don't know. I think WoW has more
Maybe.
legitimate applications than Sorry did. I think
Maybe.
it can be misused just as badly as well as Sorry can.
Yeah. Someone's asking what roping is. It's basically taking forever on the turn until the little burning rope that tells you your time is almost up comes up.
Yep.
So that's roping.
Yes, I get it. It's technically a fuse. Everyone calls it the rope.
Yeah.
Everyone.
It's a pretty ropey looking fuse.
It also, it doesn't really look like a fuse. It looks more like a rope.
Yeah, it's the burning rope.
So, but I like the WoW emote. I like it quite a bit. So
I'm fine with it. Yeah, but it's just
It's fine. I wish
it's
Sorry
very
was still
TM.
there too. Like I really
just
would.
add
'Cause
another
that's
one.
what they said is that Sorry was not you. Or I think actually Yang Wu tweeted back at me because I was like, no, that's like my emote.
Yeah.
And yeah, he tweeted back and said, well, if everyone used the emote like you did, then we probably could have kept it in.
So
But
Yangwu basically told everyone this is why we can't have nice things.
yes, exactly.
Cool. Thank you, Internet. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And on
People
that,
were just sincere with their stories. It would have been fine.
yeah. Well, on that note, that will bring us to the end of this episode. Thanks again to our patrons supporting us at patreon.com/TAC. If you cannot support us monetarily, a great free way to support us is by dropping us 5-star reviews in the iTunes store if you enjoy the show. So thank you to Virtual Gain, Bemok2753, who said, the hosts synergize as well as Cthulhu and his disciples.
Whoa. Who's Cthulhu and who's the disciples?
Ben Barode is Cthulhu and we are his disciples.
We are his
Okay.
disciples. This is probably true.
Yep. Finally, Justin Mikolayski left us a 5-star review, but also want to know if you could get personal one-on-one advice from one of us on deck building, to which I was going to recommend that he go and check out your Patreon, Dills, because you do Hearthstone coaching.
Yeah, so I'm not going to pimp my Patreon on this show because I would rather people who listen to this show just become patrons of TAC. But if this is something you're specifically looking for, I do actually offer this through my Patreon. So if this is something you want, that's one way to do it. We're at 97 right now, patrons, and $50 away from me doing weekly deck techs, which is the next goal to hit. So if this is if you guys are interested in stuff like that and you're already TAC patrons, then feel free to check that out. It's also, we got a really cool community. So yeah, it's like a little sub community within this community, which is awesome as well. So if you're looking for stuff like that, there is a way.
And when we see all of our current patrons leave and go to Dills' Patreon, you're fired, Dills. Have fun.
It'll be fine at that point, right?
I know. But yeah, no. Dills offers Hearthstone coaching. Go check that out. Mr. Justkin, last name hard to pronounce. As always, check out The Angry Chicken and more other fine podcasts at amove.tv or youtube.com/amovetv. Big fat thanks to our Patreon producers Declan H., Peter Williams, and King Louie. Get tax swag over at bit.ly/amovestore and our t-shirt over on /slate.com. Follow us on Twitter at TAC Podcast and catch us live every Tuesday night at 4 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/amovetv. Thanks to alphageekmedia.com for our live mobile stream, and thanks to BrianGriffithMusic.com for our intro and outro music. Dills, where can folks find you?
You can check me out on Twitter. I am at Willie Dills. The Twitch stream is twitch.tv/WillieDillsSF. We'll be streaming after this show and pretty much the rest of this week daily. And check out the other shows I do in the Instance and Stormcast. The Instance has moved to Sunday nights, at least until Patrick gets back from Japan. So if you're wondering why the show wasn't on Friday, that's why we moved it to Sunday evening, which is actually pretty good. Who knows? We may end up staying there. And last thing is check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/WillieDillsSF. And if you want to help me out, please just go there. Even if you don't watch anything, just click the subscribe button. The more subscribers I have, the easier it is for people to find the channel. So, and there will be a bunch of new stuff if we hit that Patreon goal, like I talked about earlier. There's going to be weekly deck tech videos there, and there's also going to be some other stuff that I'm working on now. That's not just going to be the vlog and streams, which are very fun, and I've gotten good feedback on. But I want to branch out a little bit into some other stuff, so kind of more topic discussions and things like that. So that's where all that will be happening. So check that out.
Awesome. Joss, how about you?
You can find me right here on A-Move TV every Wednesday night. We're actually trying out a new time slot. We're bumping gamers in by an hour because Ryan has that whole baby thing, and apparently that's like important or something. I don't know, but so we're giving it a try. We're going to try doing 8 p.m. Eastern start times just for a little while and see how that shakes out. So if you are looking for the gamers in, we're going to be starting an hour later, but it's still on Wednesdays and still at twitch.tv/AMoveTV. You can also find me and everything I do at Joss Plays. You can check out jossplays.com for links to everything. And a reminder, tonight is Ladies' Night. Yay! It's like my favorite night of the week.
And the feeling's right. Oh, yes, I do this every time. Almost every time. Sorry.
What Garrett said.
Yep. Yep. Go check out Ladies' Night. You can follow me on Twitter at GarrettArt. Check me out on Into the Nexus Talking Heroes. And I just put out a new episode of The Angry Nerd, which is my solo show, which also has its own Patreon. You know, if you're not supporting all three of us on our own separate Patreons, plus the Anger Chicken, plus God knows what else, enough. So check that out. Angry Nerd.
Oh, also embrace the spoilers.
Yes. Oh, God. Yeah, we forgot to mention this last week.
We always forget to mention
Yeah,
this.
well, we've only been doing it for, well, technically 3 weeks, but I think only 2 weeks because we do it after Angry Chicken. So we only had 2 opportunities on the show to mention it, and we have failed. We will correct that now. Jocelyn and I are spoiling the living hell out of Game of Thrones Season 6. So look up Embrace the Spoilers, / Game of Thrones if you want very specific instructions on how to find that on iTunes. Or just go to amove.tv. It was posted today. It's right up there on the news feed. Very easy to find. We're having a blast. We've been wanting to do a pop culture thing together for a while, so this is us kind of getting our feet wet. We'll see where it goes from here, but hope everyone enjoys that. That's going to do it for now. Don't forget to check out squarespace.com. Use the code TAC at checkout to get 10% off of your first order. You will support us in the process by doing so. So go build yourself an awesome website and get a discount. Until next time, job's done.
Job's done.
Job's done.
Yes!